This is like one of the worst things that I see founders doing when they're telling their story, but particularly when they're pitching to someone, is they're going through and they're going and they've got a slide and you see the investor perk up. You see them kind of like lean in or start to write something down, or they go to ask a question, or even they do ask a question. They ask this question and the founder says, oh yeah, we thought about that. It's really important. Or they give a quick, oh yeah, I know the answer to that. Look how great I am and impressive because I know the answer. And then they move on. And I'm like, no, that person just told you the thing that is interesting, or they might have told you the thing they're worried about. Don't jump to your next slide. Be willing to go, okay, I had this in my head that I was going to do XYZ. It turns out Y is the thing that they want to talk about.
Right. Welcome to Austinpreneur, our show about the stories that made Austin, Texas a global hub for startups. The show is produced by Capital Factory and hosted by me, Nick Spiller. As a reminder, by joining Capital Factory, you can plug into the ecosystem where the stories on this show were set. Learn more about us at capitalfactory.com. Are you bringing a medical device to life? DesignPlex Biomedical has your back. They help startups and innovators go from first sketch to full-scale manufacturing. They specialize in Class 2 and Class 3 devices. Whether it's a redesign or a brand new idea, they'll guide you through prototyping, development, and production. Ready to build something life-changing? Visit DesignPlexBio.com and go get started. Well, we'll go ahead and kick it off. I want to welcome everyone back to the Austinpreneur podcast, where we talk about the innovators and the entrepreneurs who are making Texas a global hub for technology, venture capital, and entrepreneurship. We have a very special guest who flew in from San Francisco Bay Area here to be with us, and has spent their life in science and tech, and now is a venture capitalist at Breakout Ventures. Has a PhD in microbiology and immunology. And yeah, we have a shared portfolio company with Breakout and Phantom Neuro, and want to ask you all to join me in welcoming Susanna Harris to the Entrepreneur Podcast.
It is so cool to be here. I love that you brought up Phantom Neuro because got to see him speak live today, Connor Glass.
Yeah.
And this is a really fun. This is the first time you've done this conference in Austin. Yeah,
That's correct.
Okay.
I think it's the fourth or fifth time we've done it, and
Yeah.
first time in Austin. Moved it from Dallas.
It's really cool. There's some interesting interactions of the different sectors and things happening here.
Yeah, that's what I think Austin's advantage from a healthcare perspective is how fresh it is, and we don't have a very encumbered life sciences industry here. We have access to that in Houston, Dallas, but we get a little bit of a fresh start, and we have a very tech-minded community. So we're hoping and trying very hard to build and do our part to advance healthcare and life sciences.
It seems like it's working.
So we're trying. Much due to our team. I think Luis and Drew on our venture team. Drew's here in the front row, and they're leading the charge, and great people, especially for entrepreneurs to connect with in this life sciences world. All right, well let's dive in. I think you got your PhD, spent some time in academia, ended up making the jump to VC. Why did you do that? Why not just be a researcher or academic for longer? Forever. I don't want to say forever, but it sounds serious.
Yeah, you can do it. I think when I started my PhD in microbiology, honestly didn't know what I was going to do with it. Just thought it was pretty cool that you could get paid to do science and to learn about science all the time. I still think science is like the coolest topic ever, that you can understand how our world works.
What was the first experiment you ever ran?
Ooh.
I guess, speaking of science.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my, the thing that comes to mind is going to tide pools and trying to guess at what was underneath things and flipping over rocks or peeking in between and seeing what would happen if you drop some little rocks in and something scooters out, and you just try to figure out how is everything connected.
That's right. You never really know what's under a rock until you turn it over.
I feel like that's very deep. Yes, exactly.
I'm just repeating back what you said to me.
No,
right?
it's true. So I think, just for me, to be able to be in a space where you could do that turning over of the rocks, and I went to grad school just to try to figure out like what rock could I turn over. And for me, what I was studying was how bacteria stick to plant roots. And it's kind of this really basic question, and why would you care? The same way that we eat yogurt or eat kimchi because the microbiome that is in our gut is really important. Same for plants, but they don't have guts. They have roots. So I was just trying to see, could we find some cool bacteria that would help the plants grow? Had a lot of fun. I loved my microscope. I miss my microscope. But why not be a researcher forever? When you end up in the academic system, you end up further and further and further away from the science. And it's kind of funny, like you still get to think about it, but you're not doing it. You're spending a lot more time writing grants, kind of convincing other people that they should let your trainees do science. And so it kind of counterintuitive, but I didn't want to end up further away from the science, which led me to leave academia and kind of have the flexibility to say like, well, what do I think is cool? How do I work in that space, but maybe not sitting at the bench?
Yeah, and now you're investing in people with microscopes on the bench. And so how did that, there's probably a lot of things you could go do other than work in an academic setting. Like, how'd you end up at Breakout?
Yeah, definitely on accident. I was going to say kind of on accident, but very on accident. Just in terms of when I got out of grad school, I graduated in 2020, and so that was kind of a weird time. But I had the experience in microbiology. I also had a lot of experience doing communications and kind of community building work, and that was a good time to be good at digital communications. And that led me into met Chris Garabedian, who runs Ontogeny, just through a happenstance interaction. Everything was virtual, so we all met random people. And he and I talked for a while, and he said, hey, we're doing early stage venture. We want to have more of the community. We want to be able to understand like what are researchers thinking about? How do we make those connections between the financial and the research space? And I was like, look, this sounds cool, but I don't really know what VC is. And he said, if you can do a PhD, you can figure out venture or something ridiculous. And I think he was right. I ended up working there for a good while. It was a fantastic opportunity. And that's actually how I met Breakout Ventures, is that there were a couple of co-investments we made. And so I've been working in that space overall for 4 or 5 years. But I focus a lot on like the platform, if you will. So meaning kind of the investors go out and I do a little bit of the deal flow. I'll go out and find people, and they'll find people, and we'll say this is the right decision to make. They're the right people doing the right thing at the right time, and we do that investment. And then a lot of my role is to be working with the founders and thinking about what resources do they need, how do we build the relationships that are going to help them get to that next funding or that next milestone or wherever they need to go.
Yeah. And you focus a lot on helping them communicate and tell their story.
Yeah, for me that's the most fun part, is that you like, it's like at this conference where you're talking to people and you're like, wow, that's necessary. The number of people I talked to about health tech today, for example, who they're describing problems in the hospital that I don't even want to know about, and that I look at and I'm like, I can't believe that is still a problem, but they're creating solutions to problems that are just like devastating to people. And so to be able to be in this space where you get to hear about these technologies that really could change the world, change people's lives, you get to hear about them before anyone else. Right. And then so often, whether it's in academia or out here in the startup world, there are great ideas, great technologies that don't get funded because that never connects to the person that they need money from, or from the partner that they want to build a relationship with.
Right. We can't land it on the non-expert.
Yeah.
And when you put it that way, it sounds like everything's so inspirational and amazing. And I at the same time, I do feel like with a lot of healthcare, biotech ventures, and I would just say like deep tech in general, you kind of come out of the research world where the lexicon is kind of sanitized, so you don't get emotional about this stuff all the time. And then, when you come to a place like this, or you're pitching investors, or you're on a podcast, kind of want to like pull the heartstrings a little bit. So, I mean, what do you think are some of the key challenges that entrepreneurs, scientific entrepreneurs face that kind of leads to this being difficult to kind of explain it to the the normal investor, or maybe just someone who's not quite as deep in your field that you're building in?
Yeah, I think you touched on it, which is that, to be a scientist, to be an engineer, you have to be objective. You have to be able to say, I really want this outcome to happen, and when it doesn't, go, okay, what's happening? You run experiments, and of course, as a human, you want the hours that you've spent and the days that you've spent for this experiment to work out, but if it doesn't, you have to accept it, and you have to move on. And so science is inherently something where you have to set aside your feelings. But people are a space where you have to have feelings. And so I think it's a really big challenge. And that's why a lot of times you hear investors talk about, we love academic founders, we don't love oh, they're so good at this, but they're not good at this. And I think that's kind of ridiculous. Like, one, people can upskill in every single way, and connecting with people, storytelling, maybe it comes easier for some people, but it's, one, innate to humans. And two, it's a skill set. You can learn it, you can build it. And so I think it's actually, like, I would rather have a kind of the typical awkward scientific founder who's like, well, no, it's not AI, it's machine learning based on an algorithm. So I don't want to call it AI, but it could be AI if we think about it this way. And I'm like, okay, I'd rather have that as the starting point, and then move towards, okay, how do we set aside some of that really picky behavior, and think about what's going to work, and think about it even as experiments of, like, how are you positioning, what data do we have around what people care about, and how can you kind of use your scientific brain? You don't have to set it aside, but you actually use it for communication.
Right. It's kind of like how you were, if you're a PhD, you can figure out VC. It's maybe not the other way around.
Yeah.
And therefore, start with people that know the stuff, and then you can kind of develop the skills. So what are the key skills? Like, what are some of the first skills you really need to hone to do this?
First skill is definitely listening. Yeah.
Wait, listening?
Yeah.
But even if I'm trying to tell someone something, I need to listen too?
Yeah, so big news. I think, someone was asking me about the difference between, like, communication and effective communication. And the difference is, like, the effect. Did you change somebody's mindset, behavior, decisions, whatever that is, by talking to them? And the difference between those two things, the way that you can take something that's, like, really good communication, a good story, and make it do something, is to understand the other person and to, like, understand their mindset right now. I think something that we rely on because we like aggregating information, we like to say, well, on average, your VC has this experience, or on average, your founder has this experience, or, I could look at this room and say, the average person is probably, like, more likely to enjoy engaging this way or that way. But it's really, really powerful when you know the person sitting across from you, and you know what they care about, not their demographic, not their job title. But, like, what are the things that get them up in the morning? What are the things that they're worried about?
Yeah. It's having a little empathy for the other person in a way.
Yeah. Being willing to say, okay, let's assume for a second I was in their spot, not just what I would feel, but can I figure out what they're feeling and just accept it, and just be like, those are their motivations. I don't need to judge them. I don't need to decide if they're good or bad. I just need to say, this is why they wake up in the morning, and here's where our motivations or our interests really line up.
Yep. If this was your podcast and you were interviewing me and you asked me, what did you learn that was most valuable in school? I would say it's listening. And it was something that one of my teachers started. It wasn't even in a class. It was I don't think has anyone been taught listening in a class. Anyone raise your hand? Anyone? Email us or tweet us. That's a different class, not different class. We started a peer mediation club. It was one of the first things I started was peer mediation club, and we got a whole training session on how to listen to someone and kind of work through these different things. And I've always felt like that's been just crazy valuable, and something that, like, before that, and even a little bit after I took that class, I didn't really know how to listen. You kind of know how to talk. I know how to listen to myself when I'm thinking, but it's people. It's a very deep thing to understand someone else.
Right. How have you seen that play out in the kind of the VC world that you occupy?
Yeah, well, I think the main thing, and I think this is like one of the benefits of my job, but one of the mistakes entrepreneurs often make is they get on the call and they just tell me shit. It's like, it's 30 minutes and they're just teaching me. I'm like, this is great. I got a whole notebook right here, like smart ideas from smart people and PhDs and like 25 minutes in, like, I'm like, all right, well, is there anything you want to hear from me? And, and they might, but it's, so yeah, I get to listen a lot, and that's my job. And it's also, it's, I don't know, I feel like there's not as much pressure when you're listening versus when you're speaking. So yeah, I think that's where I've seen it come in, but it takes every day, and I think it avoids a lot of tough situations, because if you kind of like have these underlying misalignments, we'll say, it kind of boils up eventually and can really mess things up.
Absolutely. Well, we've all had this situation where you're talking to somebody and you think you're aligned on something, and even if let's use something that's simple of like a sports team. You think that because both of you are from, I grew up in Iowa. I grew up in the middle of Iowa, which is right near Ames, where there's ISU. And if I mentioned that to someone, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, go Cyclones!" But I went to University of Iowa for undergrad, and so you have these Hawkeyes. Yeah, there you go.
I've been to Iowa.
Why?
Turkey hunting.
Oh, okay, turkey hunting. This makes sense. That is a valid reason to go to Iowa.
Right. My brother lived in Iowa, worked for John Deere. I went turkey hunting. Yeah.
There you go. No, Iowa can be a fantastic place, but you can have these like weird little moments where you're talking to somebody and you go like, yeah, go Cyclones, and then there's just that clip, and that's fine. We're used to that. That's the social awkwardness. It's fine. But when you're asking someone for $5 million and you teach them about how the brain works, and you didn't look up the fact that they have a PhD in neuroscience, like they're not going to get the $5 million. And so it's like you can do a little bit of that research in advance, because I think listening is both listening to what people are saying, but also like what information they put out in the world. So figure out what their background is. Try to figure them out as much as you can. And then even in the conversation, instead of like coming in and being like, okay, here's my deck and let me tell you about the brain and how amazing it is, and then we're going to switch to the gut, and say like, what do you think about, when we talk about the brain, what do you think about? Just ask the other person questions.
Yeah. It's a lot of why we produce this podcast, is to bring investors and other people and get them to open up. And I always recommend entrepreneurs is like, hey, don't just look at the website, don't just look at their LinkedIn, like find them speaking live at an event, on a YouTube video, and you can really understand and just get a lot more data and develop that perspective of who you're trying to do business with.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the motivations, right? It's easy to say, okay, what are the motivations of my investor? Well, they want to invest in an early stage company that's about to hit that inflection point, and they're going to 10x their investment in 5 years. Yeah, that's a good thing, but it's probably not actually the reason that human being wakes up in the morning. There's plenty of people who used to be scientists who are now in venture, and they are in venture because they want to see technologies that make a difference in the world go from being in the academic lab out into the world where it can have that impact. You have people who are really focused on climate change, and that is something that is not just important for their work, but it's like core to their identity. And so if you can understand like, what is the thing that's going to hook this person so that when they see the red flags in your company, they're at least willing to dig through them with you. They're willing to, instead of just writing it off and being like, okay, I talked to them, but like this, I don't know this market. I'd have to dig in so much. I'm just not going to do it. Right. Have them lean in and go, okay, it's a project. All right, we're going to do it. But I think this company is cool, and want to know.
Right. Get to know them. All right, and then what's one more skill that scientific entrepreneurs should develop?
I think it's thinking on the fly. It's being willing to change the story that you're trying to tell, because this is like one of the worst things that I see founders doing when they're telling their story, but particularly when they're pitching to someone. It's just heartbreaking. Is they're going through and they're going and they've got a slide, and you see the investor perk up. You see them kind of like lean in or start to write something down, or they go to ask a question, or even they do ask a question. They ask this question and the founder says, oh yeah, we thought about that. It's really important. Or they give a quick, like, oh yeah, I know the answer to that. Look how great I am and impressive because I know the answer. And then they move on. And I'm like, no, that person just told you the thing that is interesting. Or they might have told you the thing they're worried about. If they're asking these questions and they're looking at you kind of funny, don't jump to your next slide. Be willing to go, okay, I had this in my head that I was going to do X, Y, Z. It turns out why is the thing that they want to talk about.
Right.
You know, dig into what they want. And that's how all storytelling is.
This reminds me of the Reese's Cup commercials. Like everyone eats to Reese's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing you're getting, but it comes in different forms, and you gotta like,
That's funny.
you gotta enable that.
You do. And I think it's because at the end of the day, like also you don't want a monolith of investors sitting on your board. You don't want every single person on your board with the same exact motivations, the same exact ideas. You want them to be aligned on your overall vision and mission and things. But you want them to have different motivations. You want somebody who's like, I'm tech, ride or die. You want someone who's thinking about the markets. You like, ideally, you want people who have like multimodal stuff, but you want them to be thinking differently and to all add something.
Yeah.
And so inherently, as you're trying to get these people around the table, they're going to want different stories. Different stories are going to pull them in. And I think about it like photography, where this is where like scientists can kind of get freaked out, is they'll be like, I don't want to pitch. I don't want to spin. I don't want to make something bigger than it is. I don't want to, what they're saying is I don't want to lie, you know, because honesty and integrity are really, really core to research. You have to trust what people are doing. But I'm like, that's the difference between, we'll use this little robot in front of us, right? I could take a picture of this robot in a bunch of different angles and it would be the same robot. It would still be accurate. Now, if I did something cute with the photo afterwards and I changed the colors, or if I put like a very tiny couch next to it and made it look like this robot, which is, I don't know, like a foot tall, and made it look like it was 10 feet tall, then that's lying. Like that's where that line is. But figuring out what are the different, kind of different angles you can tell your story from.
Right. Our founder and chairman, or chairman, co-founder, Gordon Doherty, delineates between exaggerating and outright lies. And, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs, they might, and I think everyone has maybe a different take on where the line is, but it's like, if you're just like, kind of like pitching what you're building and maybe it's not quite there yet, but you're not making any like outright statements that you can do this now, you know, that's what entrepreneurs do. And then the reality is, like, most entrepreneurs are exaggerating and they're hyping things up to the max, and that's who you're out there investing against. And so, you know, I think you've got to, you know, deal with that a bit, and you gotta, you know, I think hype it up to where people get excited and you're pitching big and going big, but also, yeah, like you can't end up breaking trust.
Yeah, I think, you know, especially for academic founders, the way that I would say to think about it is like the discussion at the end of your papers or at the end of your grants, where really that end of the paper, the end of the grant, if you actually look at it, you're like, you are suggesting things that are nowhere within your scope. You're not even saying you're going to do this. Like it's so ambitious that the things that you bring up in a discussion are things that you admit you will never do, and you hope some scientist after you does. Like that's how I want people to think about their story when they're pitching, is you're pitching the world that would exist if what you're doing works. And so you don't need to say, my tech is going to work like this and this is what we're going to see, but you're giving someone the opportunity to think about, like, what are they really investing in? Because they're not investing in what you have right now, to be honest. They're not investing, because that's not an investment. That's I don't know, like a bond.
It's definitely not how they're valuing your company.
No, they're investing in the future that ideally will happen.
Right.
But what about you? I mean, you said earlier, if I was interviewing you, what would your second thing be?
I see now you've taken that comment to heart, and now you're asking me questions. So I'm not used to this. What was the question?
Yeah, your question was like, what would be another tip? So we talked about listening. You talked about kind of that, like, it's the empathy part of things.
It's a good question. I think having a one-sentence description is key. Josh Baer has a formula that I've internalized, where it's we help customer, which is a person. Companies aren't customers. Customers are people. Solve the problem by the solution, right? And just having a consistent format to tell it, and kind of always iterating on that. So it's like, we help entrepreneurs solve their fundraising problems by introducing them to investors. You know, talk about a quick one. So yeah, I think being able to describe it in a brief one-sentence way and is one of the hardest things to do, but also it just kind of allows people to wrap their head around it. And then you go in, level 2, and then they're still listening. Oh, great, level 3, and then you can kind of keep going. And hopefully they start driving the conversation and asking questions. So that'd be one of my tips.
Yeah, I think that's a great one, and I think it's fun because that's a skill that I think a lot of VCs look for in the founders that they're investing in, but it's also one of the skills that VCs are awful at. Like if you ever, don't do this when you're trying to get their money, but ask a VC what their product is or what their value proposition is. Just say what do you think and if you find one who can tell you, that's a winner. I'm not oh no, don't do it. But it's hard to take what you are building or what is a huge center of your life and turn it into a single sentence. And I think if you can do that, like you said, if you can do that, it means that you can do the paragraph, you can do the full pager because you figured it out.
Right. So how would you describe Breakout Ventures in one sentence?
Yeah, I was I did that to myself. It's funny, we actually do this I think our tagline is kind of what we do, which is that, and it's not going to follow your formula, unfortunately, but our whole thing is building the future powered by science. And I think the piece of that is that we, as investors, we take board seats in almost all of our companies. And so to that idea of do VCs actually build? We'll start there with the first word, building the future. I think if you find ones who want to, they will. There's some who do, there's some that don't.
Sure.
And so we like working with companies who are early, where their stuff works on the bench or works in a garage, but they need to bring it into a manufacturing suite or they need to scale. We like to take it from idea that is feasible to let's actually build this into something. And then that goes towards that point of the future of really we want to think about what should the world be. What is not right now, and not even what could be better or what would be fun, but what are the things that we take for granted that are actually not okay. One of our companies works on they have a sepsis diagnostic, and before what's really fun about my job is I get to learn about all these different things, and then I get to be horrified at what problems exist. So I was learning about sepsis, and it was one of the number one it might be the number one killer in hospitals. It's a nightmare because really early on it's hard to find, easy to treat. As it gets later and later, it's really easy to spot, but really hard to treat. And turned out the standard of care for that was swabbing stuff onto plates and waiting to see if bacteria grow, or there are some markers that you can look at blood draws, but they're not very accurate. And you look at something like this where you're this is killing so many people from infections that you can cure with antibiotics very easily, and we're okay with waiting 8 to 24 hours for results. So yeah, Cytoveil is awesome. They've brought it down to 8 minutes with 90% accuracy. Oh, it's amazing.
Is that a blood test or?
Yeah. Okay. Here, we're just gonna nerd out.
Tell us about that.
So, and I think this
actually
encapsulates what kind of company we're excited about. We do platform companies, meaning we like stuff where there's this big tech unlock. So that can be biotech, chemtech, even software, where there's some basic science unlock. That's the building the future powered by science, because it has to all have some science underneath it. Where the unlock here was that 1, super high speed cameras, 2, microfluidics, so liquid going through little tiny tubes. And 3, basic biology and understanding what happens to your cells, like the cells in your blood, when you go septic. So when you are developing sepsis, which basically you have too much bacterial load somewhere in your body, and your body actually just panics. It freaks out and thinks the only way to get rid of this infection is to go to the extreme and just flood your system with everything possible, and you basically go into shock because your organs start shutting down. Just gnarly situation.
Ugh.
Understandably, your blood starts doing weird things, physiologically you start changing. And so this combination, so what was found is that when you are going into sepsis, you're heading in, but you're nowhere near showing really outward signs yet, your cells get squishy. And so if you squish them, if you pressurize them, normally cells will pop back up like a little beach ball, and these will kind of stay deflated, which is fine, but the throughput on that is super low. And so that's where this other technology came in, was taking these cells and running them through the little tiny tube where there's basically a little dent at one spot, and behind that is a camera that, like, this camera is used to make bombs. It's so fast, and it takes a quick picture. And so then they layered AI on top of that, and they're able to, within 8 minutes, just flow someone's blood through. It's a simple blood draw, same as you normally get. It saves so many lives. And then to the point of, like, how do you build the future? You have to solve the problem. It's not just saving the lives, but it's, to your point of, like, people make decisions. In hospital settings, it's administrators, it's nurses, things like that. It also saves the hospital, on average, $1,400 per patient, because they get to let people out if that person is not going septic. So I just, like, that, it's kind of that space that we like to play in is, yeah, we want to build the future, because the future, you shouldn't die of something that you could have treated with something you can get over the counter, or, like, go to your pharmacist and get something. And then the Powered by Science is, it does have to have a science unlock underneath it. We don't really do the little one-ups. We don't do stuff where it's like, we found a different business model, or, we've figured out a different way to use human psychology to have customer adoption or something like that, which is super cool still. But yeah, it has to be like, the science didn't exist 10 years ago, and now we can put it together.
Breakout science.
Yeah, breakout science.
One more question for you, and we'll turn it over. And I don't know if this is one you focus on or not, but sometimes you need to articulate your innovation to just the status quo, and the saboteurs, the people that don't want to change, maybe even if it's better for the whole. I mean, any tips for flipping those folks to the good side?
Which kinds of folks are we thinking here?
Thinking of the institutional antibodies that come out when you try to change things. So bureaucrats, lawyers.
Yeah, like, you can't
love
touch
them.
that.
You need them. But
You need them, yeah. And I think that I think is the right point, is that you do need them. And you need them because there should be checks on our system.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would be terrified to see entrepreneurs totally stunted in what they want to and are able to do. But it would also be pretty scary to have just, like, every idea that anyone's ever had greenlit.
Right. Back with, like, you're building consumer apps, you'd say, fuck it, ship it. You can't really do that.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's actually the really big thing in biotech, especially, things that take a long time to build, is it's not like software. It's not like you're building a software company, or you can't do something that, like, Slack did, where they were a totally different company. They had totally different goals. And then they said, oh, we found something small that seems to be working. Like, let's just build this. You can't be 3 or 4 years into developing a system to find new drugs for cancer and testing out your pipeline, and then suddenly go, like, actually, I think I'm going to just use this drug for something else. Like, you actually can't. And so I think, to your question of how do you get people on board, is really to understand what their concerns are, and to dig further into that. And is that, like, are they actually, if you say, hey, so there's one of our other companies that I think is one of those that you're like, this is so necessary, and it's going to freak people out. A group called Vitra Labs. And so Vitra, they're working on kind of like the new paradigm of IVF, trying to figure out, for in vitro fertilization, how do we not use humans as the petri dish? Because right now, the way that you get out the mature eggs is that you take a person, you give them a bunch of hormones, and then their body does all of the chemical processing to develop the eggs and mature them enough that you can take out those eggs, and then you can move forward with that system. They're looking at it and going, actually, we know what chemicals need to be released in your body to mature the eggs. So instead of getting you the hormones and then you make the chemicals, what if we just take out the follicles at this point and give you the hormone, or don't give you the hormones, but put those chemicals into that space and just differentiate the cells ourselves. Like, that's really cool, but it is a space where as soon as you touch fertility or something, people get a little, like, there's red flags, as there should be.
Hot topic.
Yes, and so you have to really focus on when people are saying, like, oh, you're never going to get that through regulations. Like, okay, well, what do you mean? Let's dig further, instead of just shutting down.
You can't just, like,
I don't think you should ignore the
fire
haters.
an insult back and blast them on Twitter. You gotta like respect this individual and their perspective, and at least assume they mean well.
assume they mean, and assume they represent more people.
Yeah.
I think is the thing, is that if somebody says something to you, there's probably other people who think it. And so, use that, and think about what perspective they're coming from. If this is a lawyer saying you're never going to make it through the FDA, be like, what do you see that I don't see? And sometimes people just, I'm definitely guilty of this. I like to, when I first see something, go like, I don't think so. I'm like definitely more pessimistic than I think the average person in venture. I'm the one who's like, no, it's not gonna work. So I like when people push back. When I say it seems like there's not the market there. It seems like this is too long. I like when they say, well, I hear you. It sounds like you're saying this. What if I told you this piece of information? And if they can have me go, oh, I just didn't understand. There was a piece of information I didn't understand. Then I'm totally on their side. And if it turned out that actually what I was understanding was right, that's something that they should then take and decide, do I need to incorporate it? Do I need Breakout's money, or is this something that doesn't work for Breakout? And so let's go over here. But
do you have an idea for a groundbreaking medical device? DesignPlex Biomedical is ready to turn your idea into a reality. From concept to prototyping, development to full contract manufacturing, DesignPlex specializes in Class 2 and Class 3 devices. Whether you're redesigning an existing product or bringing a new innovation to market, they can be your end-to-end go-to-market partner. Quality, innovation, commercialization. That's DesignPlex. Learn more at designplexbio.com. Who has a question for Susanna? All right, Mr. Drew, front and center.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Susanna, for coming. It's great to have you. As we're talking about scientific evangelism and communication to venture, I think, we covered a lot of great topics on the episode already about how to communicate it once you're already in the room. One of the biggest challenges I've seen to PhD students, folks still in academia or transitioning and really raising that first round, I see a lot of difficulty a lot of times with people saying, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to talk to an investor yet, right? This isn't the right time. I need to get this perfect. I think just general advice, right? Is that a fair assessment? Is that a fair question or a fair demon in the back of the head? And if not, right, what are maybe some of those metrics where, someone can prepare themselves, get ready, or who should they be talking to before an investor, right?
Thoughts on founders who aren't quite ready to share their ideas, a little shy. Is that a good thing, or how should they be thinking about that?
Yeah. So there's a pretty good saying that I think is just really true, which is, if you go to investors asking for money, you're going to get advice. And if you go asking for advice, you'll get money. So actually, when you're not quite ready is the perfect time to talk, because you've taken all the pressure off the table and you're going to somebody and saying, I just want your viewpoint. Now, you can't waste their time. You can't go in and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. What do you think I should do? Nobody likes that. But if you go in and you say, hey, you have this background, or you guys just invested in this company, it's similar to ours, but we're different this way. I'd love to get your perspective on the market, or I'd love to get your perspective on this type of tech, or making it about them. You get that information. To that, the thing that's really hard to see is when you have founders who they say, I'm just not ready yet, but they're not figuring out what they need to be ready. And you're like, the only way you're going to be ready to talk to investors about raising money from them is to talk to them. And so if you get a chance to talk to them before you're raising, ideal. That's the perfect thing. There's a lot of, we definitely do this, a lot of venture firms keep track of their conversations. So we use a CRM system, like a spreadsheet on steroids, that allows us to say, when have we talked to somebody? How was the conversation? If we start going through diligence, we decide no, we'll take notes on why that was a no. And that's actually really helpful, because as soon as somebody's name comes back up, we go back in and say, oh yeah, we talked to them 9 months ago. Well, what did we talk about? Oh, they were looking for advice about this. What did we say? Well, we said that they should check out this market. They did. For us, there's the technical risk that we're thinking about, and there's the market risk, but then there's the people risk. And if you know the person that you're about to invest in, and if you felt like, hey, I know how they take advice. I know what they do when I give them some piece of mentorship, or if I tell them, if I challenge them, how will they respond? Will they push back? Will they listen? You're actually you are helping the investor take the people risk out of that decision. So yeah, I just think like lower the stakes, have the conversation, and well, I don't know, don't worry about it too much.
Investors fund lines, not dots. You gotta get out
Ooh.
there. That's Josh Bayer's quote, or something. He might be quoting someone else, but not from me. But yeah, the investors fund lines, not dots. You have to build an impression, and ideally, it's like every time you're talking to them, it's progress is being made. One of the hardest things, entrepreneurs do a lot of things. One of the hardest things for entrepreneurs to do is like do the things they say they're gonna do.
Yeah.
Right. And like actually on these 3 to 6 month milestones where you're saying, yeah, the next 3 months I'm going to accomplish this. That's going to increase my value. It's going to allow me to raise money like this. And yeah, like I'm always taking notes. Like when you make a claim about the future, I'm going to note that down. And next time we talk, I'm like, that's what I'm going to look before we go to the meeting. And just like, all right, well, see how it went. And it's even better when it's like you do more than you say you're going to do. But yeah, you find it's like you get pulled all these different directions.
Yeah, you want to see progress, even if it's not forward progress. Sometimes it's sideways progress, but
yeah, or at least learning and doing things.
Yeah.
You gotta get some feedback and some data. Who else has a question?
I've got a million questions because I'm a new CMO marketing to scientists. So what advice would you have for a new CMO trying to communicate to scientists about tech and data? It's a really tough market.
so how to communicate to scientists about tech and data, how to do that communications, but the opposite way, kind of. I think, okay, so scientists can be, doing the generalization, can be a tricky group because you have a group of people who wanted to be really, really, really good at something, which means that they're probably not super comfortable not being good at something. And so it's really hard to find out what they don't know. And so I think that's where the open-ended questions of, the best thing ever, I think with a lot of scientists, you can say like, well, as you know, X, Y, Z, and you can tell them a fact that's not true and they'll go, like, it's pretty fun. So
Try that.
you should try it. It's a good chance if you're like, okay, I'm not sure if this person actually understands. Like, are they that smart? Do they know everything? Or are they just like so afraid of saying, actually, I'm not aware of that one. So I think, that's a fun activity, but the way that comes through is to just like ask those questions of, so how do you think about data security? Or like for you, what's your top priority? And then you can kind of flesh out from there. If somebody says like, my top priority for using more tech in my life is to decrease the amount of time I spend on something. Like they're going to be thinking about that tech as a tool versus someone else who might say, gosh, I like really am hesitant about adopting new technology because not only is it a drain on my time, but I don't know about security and maybe they throw out a bunch of technical terms. And so you have that good sense. But I think actually an area where scientists and VCs really, really overlap is liking to dig into things themselves. I think about it as like those kind of those sand play boxes where you can hide fossils in them. And you think about it of like the fossil find is not fun if all the fossils are on the top. And it's also not fun if they're so hard to find, you're never going to get them, or like that fossil's not in there. And so I think it's okay with scientists or VCs to like give them the start and let them drive some of that conversation. Or if it's on a website where you're not having the face-to-face conversation, it doesn't need to all be on the front page. Like you can have some click through, you can have some of that digging. I don't know. What do you think? You talk to scientists.
Yeah, I think asking the right questions is always a good place to start. When you're like really like that you're up against someone that's hard and it's not going to just like be very open-minded. It's being able to ask questions without being condescending or passive aggressive or having microaggression, but asking a tactful question. And if you do that just right, I think it can really change how people think. Much more than like sharing a fact or information. And
Yeah.
good question, Monty. Monty's been on the show. It's our portfolio. All right, we've got Kyle in the back, and a few more.
So I'm a founder of a digital health technology and care delivery platform, and self-bootstrapped and self-funded it up until we've hit profitability. We started a little seed round. We found product market fit. We have over 30,000 patients waiting to get enrolled. But we're at a point where I've learned that raising a $2 million seed is kind of harder than raising like a $5 or $10 million Series A. We have like revenue traction, and so we also have a sister company that is a medication adherence tool with patents and stuff like that, where if we were to merge these two, which we could, and kind of change our capitalization plan, it'd probably be a lot easier to capitalize the company and scale what we've built. If you were in this position, how would you look at either, restructuring your capitalization plan, or would you look at potentially like trying to go down the debt financing route instead of like selling equity and going through so much more due diligence? What would you do in that position with a giant market, and just in the way the capital markets are right now with fundraising?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, so you're talking about the situation where you've kind of got these two core diverging paths. Do you go towards a small seed, which on the surface you'd think, okay, raising 2 million has to be easier than raising 5, or do you go towards the raise 5 or 10 at a Series A, which then you have the dilution aspects of things, and now you're like, well, there's another piece that we could fit together, and so you kind of have these two tracks that either is feasible, neither is easy. And you're trying to figure out which one to go down. Is that right? More or less? Okay. I think, first of all, kudos for getting to this point. The fact that you're at a point where you're thinking, is it going to be better to raise 2 or 5? And you're not thinking like, am I going to be able to get 1? That's pretty cool. The other is that, you're in good company. Like at this conference today, I've talked to multiple people who are in a similar situation, and it's something that even on the venture side, we talk about a lot of like, should we give? It's kind of the opposite, where we like, well, this company is raising a $2 million seed, but can they do anything with a $2 million seed, or are we gonna fund them to fundraise? Are we gonna give them $2 million so that they have a year of runway, and then the rest of our money is going to raise the seed or the Series A? So I think where I would go here is try to get a better sense on both sides. First decide kind of what are your go, no-goes, like what are your gating points? What information are you going to gather from both of those sides of when do you say this is not a viable direction? And so maybe that's something where you say, well, once I realize that the dilution is going to get to X number, then I'm not going to do that decision on the A. Or on the seed, it's going to be like, when I realize that that's not going to get me the runway that I need, or that's going to cause me to have to raise sooner than I want. Like figuring out what your go, no-goes are, and then trying to check those off systematically. Because you tell me if I'm wrong, but every investor you talk to is going to have a different answer, and they're going to have a different, I know exactly what you should do this, which is really confusing. So instead of it being that you have to go out and explore the entire landscape, if you can bring it down to, okay, there's 5 things that would cause me to not do the A. There's 5 things that would cause me to not do the seed. Then you're able to go find those points. And the thing that I would say specifically for the A is that it's really easy for people to say, oh yeah, you could raise 5. 5 is going to be so much easier. I don't know that it really
Anyone
is.
who's saying you raising anything is going to be easy doesn't know what they're talking about.
It's
hands down. I hear these. You could totally go.
Yeah, and I think it's really comes down to are those the decision makers? Because I would say that that's also why I'm hedging a little bit, is like I'm not the decision maker for my firm. I'm not the person who's going to be at the end of the day like, okay, I hear your complaints, but no, we're writing the check. It's really easy for me to say, oh, go for the 5, because at the end of the day, I can't say yes to it, so it doesn't really matter. So make sure the people that you're talking to, when they say, well, you should definitely do 2, say, well, okay, are you the person at your firm who would greenlight that? I'm not saying you have to, but are you the person who actually can give me that answer? And then to that last piece you asked of debt financing, other venture money is some of the worst money that you can take. If you're in success, the more of your company that you own, the better. So if your company goes the direction that you believe it will, you want to own as much of it as you can. So if there are other funding options on the table that aren't going to be dangerous, like debt can be really hard right now, But I think all of those avenues are really worth exploring. But again, even with the debt side, say like, well, if it turns out that these are going to be the terms and conditions, I'm not doing it. Like it'll help you kind of narrow in.
I think the one key thing is that you don't want to raise half as much as you need. You have to, if you're going to go do a financing, you have to raise enough to accomplish milestones, which will allow you to raise money from the next class of investors, right? If you're a pre-seed, like how do you get up to the seed investors? What does that mean? What are the key, value inflection points for your business? You got to go get enough to hit those, plus a little cushion, because things never go perfect. And yeah, I think in a lot of ways, if you're raising from traditional ventures, like $2 million is almost just like under the mark of what's happening. And like these rounds are getting so big that yeah, very well, maybe you just go raise a larger round, frankly. Cool. I think we have another question here.
Howdy, my name's Melanie. You mentioned with Vitris, like a bedside diagnostic and all the workflows of the people who would be using it that may be in a lab in a busy hospital system. Have you seen any broad challenges or opportunities in clinical use based on the workflows that people are having in hospitals and how varied they are? And how are you kind of coaching people to navigate through that in order to get things from bench to bedside?
Yeah, great question around, there's all these systems that make our hospital systems go or our care systems go, and there's pretty obvious like inefficiencies or just total breakdowns in some spaces. So it is an area that I think a lot of people are excited about. Working with hospitals is something that even like we're always a little wary of because the kind of customer acquisition side and timescales. But I think too, like the biggest thing for us that we've learned is knowing that key decision maker. Kind of going back to that point of like who can say yes or who can say no. It's really customer discovery, and it's being willing to go talk to a doctor or a nurse or an administrator and have them tell you to your face that they don't want your product. And it's like very, very, very quickly deciding like, what am I doing wrong? And so if you go in and say, I've got this amazing thing, tell me everywhere that you would use it. It's really easy for someone who does not have signing power to go, oh, that's incredible. I would love that. There's so many things that would make like practitioner and care providers' lives better. Is it gonna happen? That's not up to them. You have this opposite situation where you have folks that it feels like they're literally working against the people that they're working alongside. Yeah, and to that, the naysayers or the people who are like, well, this is how it works.
The saboteurs.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, it's understanding who makes the decisions and being honest about it, and really trying to get them to tell you what's wrong with your idea. Like saying, okay, if I build this thing, why will you still not say yes? Oh, because it doesn't have a code, or oh, because my surgeons hate tech. Whatever it is. If they're like, look, you can create the most amazing, prompt system to help neurosurgeons, but at the end of the day, the people that I work with are just not going to use it. Like, find out why it's not going to work. Decide if that's a break point for you. See if that's kind of true across the system, but then align. Be like, okay, well, you're telling me that this group of people is just not going to use the tech. What if it was something that was integrated that their assistant could use it? What if this was something that was built into your systems already and it felt seamless? Is this because they don't want to get trained on a new thing and they just don't like new, or is it because like it's not possible that someone comes into a hospital system and learns nothing? So like, is it your older surgeons? Yeah, I would try to get the no. Like, I'd try to figure out why they're going to say no to you before you've spent 8 months trying to make this happen.
I think one thing I'm hearing on a good part of this is like, it's human nature to tell you what's going to make you feel good, right? Like tell you what you want to hear. It's kind of a nice thing to do. It's maybe not a kind thing to do. But yeah, if you get to a point where anyone, especially an investor, is articulating like a thoughtful critique, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It means that they're really engaged and they're ready to like kind of like do business and be upfront and honest. Otherwise, yeah, you kind of are just like giving everyone thumbs up and encouraging them, hopefully not outright gaslighting them, but I think sometimes that happens and people get over the top in the venture world, and it's not a great thing.
Yeah, well, and I think that it's something that definitely investors struggle with is giving feedback, and the reason is we've all been burned giving feedback, and whether it's professional or it's a friend, and you're like, I actually don't think that's a great, that's not the best outfit, or like, I don't know that that's a good idea, and it makes the relationship bad. Yeah, it's really, really hard to give critical feedback. So you have to create the space where they can do it. And there's even cute little ways to do it. Instead of saying, why wouldn't you do this? Say, like, are there any reasons that people you work with wouldn't like this? And it's really funny because that person obviously did not go ask anyone in the 0.5 seconds between when you ask them the question to when they can tell you what other people would find issues with, which means that they actually have an issue with it or they could imagine an issue. So that can give people a really nice out of being like, okay, it sounds like you're excited, but I could talk to a lot of your colleagues, and if I should talk to anyone, let me know. But do you have a sense of like, what are the things about the system that other people would have a concern about? It's fun. They will literally go from being like, this is perfect, I think it's amazing, sign me up, I'd love to write the check, to like, well, here's this and here's that and here's
Spill
this.
the tea.
Yeah, you're just giving them an out so that they're bringing you news that might be hard, but you can't get mad at them because they're not saying it. They are helping you. They are saving you from a difficult conversation because they're doing it for the other person who is also them. Yeah, exactly.
I think that is a wonderful note to wrap it up on. Will y'all join me in thanking Susanna for coming on the podcast? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Awesompreneur. Don't forget to check out capitalfactory.com to learn more about us and join our community. If you have thoughts about the show or ideas on how we can work together, reach out to me directly via email, nickspiller@capitalfactory.com. Shout out to the Capital Factory Dream Team for making this podcast possible, and special thanks to Aaron Handworker, who masterfully recorded and edited the show. Come back next week for a whole new episode.